What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to Marriage and Medicine. Today's video, I would like to talk about a gap year. So for those of you that may not know, a gap year is basically taking a break between finishing undergrad and going into medical school. Some people, it's kind of a dreaded thing. It's basically like, I'm doing a year of what exactly? It just kind of seems like a waste for some people. Other people, that ends up being their favorite time of their life, basically, because they get a chance to take a break, kind of recharge, and kind of go from there. So a lot of people may be forced into a gap year. So of course, medical school is very competitive. It is always a possibility that somebody may not get in on their first try, and that is perfectly okay. It happens to a majority of people, so definitely keep trying. But it is a possibility you may not get in and you're forced to take a gap year. And a lot of times during this gap year, people take that time to either build up their resume. So they're, doing some extra shadowing, doing some extra volunteer work, taking some extra classes, really to kind of show that they're competitive for medical school. It varies. Some people take a gap year just because they want to, and they need a second to recharge because undergrad was a little bit grueling and they feel as though they don't want to go directly into medical school. And that's definitely fine as well. But during that time, definitely be strategic with it. When you get to the point where you get into medical school interviews and all those kind of things afterwards, they're going to ask you, so what did you do during that time? If you just say, I didn't really do much, I just was kind of a bum, that's not a good look. So you definitely want to make sure that you're doing something that is improving your life in one way or another, whether that's taking a mission trip, whether that's actually doing some volunteer work or whatever it is. Make sure that it's something that you can talk about during your interview so that you can, it a lot of times can help you stand out as well, mainly due to the fact that it'll give you an experience that some other people may not have had. So it's something that can work both ways altogether. One thing to consider kind of when you're making that decision of, should I take a gap year or should I not take a gap year? One thing is for sure, like, how do you feel emotionally, mentally? Medical school is tough. It's definitely going to be a lot of study and a lot of book work. Sometimes after undergrad, you're just burnt out. And so if you're in that category, you definitely should consider taking a break in between so that you can be recharged and you can be ready to go for medical school. Mental health is by far the most important thing when it comes to trying to get through this journey. So making sure that you keep that intact is very important. So definitely consider those options when it comes to that. But other things that you want to think about in the other direction is when you make that decision to take a gap year, understand that you are delaying your attending pay for a year in essence. So don't think about it like, oh, I just want to take this time to enjoy life for a little bit because I haven't gotten a chance to do it in a while. You have to think, is that worth $200,000 to $400,000 or $500,000 basically? Because again, that's what you're going to be getting paid as an attending in most specialties. In some specialties, some are a little bit less, but for majority you're going to be in that range. And so you definitely want to think about, is it worth it? And for some people, it might be. It might be just, I have to go and do this. I have to go live life. For other people, if you're still feeling good, you're still feeling refreshed, I would definitely recommend just trying to just go all the way through if you can. For me, I went all the way through. I was definitely blessed to be able to do so, and it paid off altogether. I mean, I was able to finish all of my training, all of my residency and all that kind of stuff by the age of 28, which is that's pretty good altogether. Again, I kind of started school a year early altogether, so I was kind of a little bit, I was always the youngest person in school. So having an opportunity to go all the way through was definitely great. It really kind of gives you the opportunity to get the hardest part of the school out of the way. There are definitely some people who, once you get that year in between out of the way, or once you get into that gap year, it's going to be very hard to find that motivation to go back. Especially if you take that year, you go get a job, you start working for a little bit, you start seeing some money coming in, you can get comfortable. And so if medical school is your ultimate goal, definitely ensure that you're one of those people who will be able to lock in and get back into that focus in order to make sure that you're able to still get things done that'll put you into that position to get into medical school altogether. For some people, it's definitely a good idea to, if for example, when you took the MCAT the first time, maybe you didn't have enough time to study for it, maybe you didn't do as good on it as you wanted to, taking a gap year is something that you certainly can do. Applications are expensive, so it's one thing you want to consider. If you feel as though you're not competitive, it's okay to, and that's kind of the one thing that you need, it's okay to take a year, really to beef up your resume from that standpoint. So definitely make sure that you are considering and weighing all of these different options when you're making that decision. One other advantage of taking a gap year would be having the opportunity to spend time with family. Undergrad can be, depending on where you are, what kind of program you are in, it can be grueling as well. And once you get to medical school, again, it gets worse. So definitely having the opportunity to establish relationships and be able to kind of foster those relationships in that year is something that people who go all the way through don't really have the opportunity to do. So that's one thing to consider. So one other thing you also want to think about is if you ended up taking out loans during undergrad, if you decide to take a gap year, understand that you're going to have to start making some kind of payments on those loans. So of course, like 6 months after you graduate is usually when you have to start making some kind of payment. So make sure that you have some kind of income so that you can do that from that standpoint. Unless you're kind of course, in a income-based repayment type of plan, so you may not have to make payments if it comes to that from that standpoint. The other thing you want to think about is just taking a gap year, it's just another time delay. There is so much delayed gratification in this journey, and having to delay it another year I couldn't imagine doing it myself afterwards, because it was just nice to be able to just get it all over and done with. But again, I know some people, you get forced into that position and you have to kind of deal with it from that standpoint. But if you have an option, if you have a choice if you're competitive enough to go ahead and try and possibly get in, from my standpoint, I would recommend go ahead and do it. From the financial standpoint, from just kind of the life standpoint, it just would be the best way to go about it, just to get it all out of the way. Because once you're done, it is very nice on the other side. So I would definitely recommend to just go ahead and get it done as soon as possible if that's the best case scenario for you. So to kind of summarize this entire video, the main thing is if you decide to go all the way through, no gaps, pros and cons of that. Pros, of course, you finish your journey earlier. You are not losing out on that first year of attending pay basically being delayed. So that's again $200,000, $500,000 give or take that you'll be getting that from your career standpoint that you wouldn't be getting if you took a year. Cons about going all the way through is you don't get a break. You just basically get thrown right back into having to study once again, and you study harder, you study longer in medical school. So not having a break during that time is something that people can look at and not want to deal with. So I can definitely understand that from that standpoint. And on the other side, pros and cons about taking a gap year is you get a break. I mean, having the ability to take that year off from having to study, having to do schoolwork is refreshing, it's recharging, which is good. You'll definitely be likely in a better mind state when it comes to actually getting into medical school. So that's definitely something that's good from that standpoint. Another pro on that side is you get a chance to spend time with family, enjoy life a little bit more. So that's nice from that standpoint as well. A con about that is, again, you're giving up a year of your attending pay, which is big. Also, just having to delay a year just puts another year having to delay gratification, which is rough when you have a long journey like getting into medical school and completing the medical journey. So that are kind of some of my thoughts about taking a gap year versus trying to get all the way through a medical school. But if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave a comment at the bottom. See y'all in the next video.